Today, we're going to be changing the rear uni joints in the Ranger because they're all a little bit tired. And as I'll show you shortly, one is barely hanging in there. What's up guys? The Ranger's been stuck in the garage for most of this week after it started making a weird squeaking noise at low speeds that sounded a little something like this. So I did a bit of research which led me to check my uni joints, and oh my god, after what I discovered, I gently pulled the Ranger into the garage and I haven't driven it a meter since. Now, if you're not familiar with what uni joints are, also known as U joints or universal joints, you've probably used one without even realizing it. These come in most socket sets and they work pretty much the same as the uni joints in your car. What they basically do is allow the drive to enter the joint from all different angles as your car flexes, bounces and moves around. They generally last quite a long time, but just like everything, they eventually wear out and need replacing. Now, I've watched a bunch of uni joint videos in the past week and there seems to be three main symptoms to look out for when your uni joints need replacing. The first is a clunk when selecting drive in automatic vehicles, so not really relevant to the manual Ranger. The second is vibration you can feel in the car when you're driving along that wasn't there before. And the third symptom, and the most you need to fix them now symptom, is the squeaking noise you heard earlier. Let me run you through what tools I'll be using to change these uni joints. So firstly, you'll need a comprehensive socket set, a hammer, or in this case, a camping mallet, a pair of multi-grips that open up and close like so, a pair of pointy nose pliers, a grease gun, and also some grease as well. I'll be using this Nulon Extreme Performance grease. The main reason I chose this one is that it actually says on the back that it's for uni joints, so just check that when you're selecting the grease. Some removable thread locker, penetrating oil or spray. Now, before you get happy in the comments, this isn't just regular WD-40, this is the WD-40 penetrant. I've never seen it before, so I'm quite curious to see how it goes. Some jack stands, a ball joint or uni joint press. You don't need one of these. I have seen people use just a hammer, so I'll try and show you both methods. A bench vise, but probably not one like this. Something more like this will do the job, that opens up nice and wide. And of course, we need our brand new uni joints. So I picked these up from Veale for around $30 each. Well, I think that is pretty much all the tools we need. Time to go and inspect these uni joints. So to check your uni joints, you'll basically want to grab the drive shaft close to the joint, so right about here, and try to move the whole shaft up, down, left, and right. So I'm not trying to rotate it, I'm trying to shift the whole shaft up, down, left, and right, trying to feel for any movement. So how much movement should there be? None, no movement whatsoever. So if you're feeling a decent movement either direction, then your uni joints need replacing. So I can feel some movement in my front one here. This is the front uni joint of the rear drive shaft. So that one's, it's not terrible, but probably due for replacement. We then have our second rear uni joint in the middle here that connects these two pieces. Try and hold one as still as you can and feel for any movement between the two. That one feels a little bit more worn out than the front one to me, so another one definitely in need of replacement. And finally, we'll move on to the very rear. Before we get to this last uni joint, I just want to say, I know it's terrible. I should have definitely noticed this sooner, and the Ranger should not have been on the road like this at all. And it hasn't been since I noticed it earlier on in the week. All right, you ready for this? Check this out. Yep, none of that movement should be there at all. This is well and truly worn out, in need of replacement probably 5,000 kilometers ago. Promise me you won't let yours get to this state, because that is so bad. All the drive from the engine is coming through that joint, and if it fails, best case scenario, we're up for a new tail shaft. But luckily you found it before that happened. Now, time to replace these joints. Now, being a four-wheel drive, we also have a front drive shaft with two more uni joints, one at each end, but we'll just be tackling the rear drive shaft today. Now, before we start, it's extremely important to chock the back wheels, both from the front and also from the back, because when we drop that drive shaft out, these rear wheels won't be connected to the engine anymore. Spray all the uni joints and drive shaft mounting bolts with your choice of penetrating oil and let them soak. Next, add some jack stands to support the drive shaft. Mark the alignment of the drive shaft and the uni joints at both ends. This might be a bit overkill, but it allows us to put it back exactly as it came off. Once they've soaked for a few minutes, we can undo the 4 bolts holding the rear of the drive shaft in place. And give it a good tap with a hammer to break it free. Okay, on to the other end. And finally, undo the 2 bolts supporting the center of the drive shaft. Alrighty, that drive shaft came out without too many issues. Do be gentle with how you treat this because you don't want to cause any damage to the drive shaft because that's a much more expensive repair. Okay, the next step is going to be to remove these old uni joints, and that's where our pressing tool comes into things. But first things first, let's pop it into a vise. And when you're doing this, never clamp it or put it in the vise on the actual drive shaft tube. You only want to clamp it from this tip flange area. Okay, now that's secured in the vise, it's time to remove the 4 clips holding the uni joint in place. So there's 1 on each of the 4 sides. And we'll be removing them using some pointy nose pliers. Okay, now that those clips have been removed, we're ready to press out the old uni joint. And that's where our press is going to come into the mix. If you don't have a press, what you can do is take a socket that fits inside that uni joint arm and give it a few solid hits with a hammer, making sure that it's held securely in the vise. But seeing as we have a pressing tool, that's what I'll be using. So basically what we're going to be doing is taking the pressing tool, place the press over the joint, sitting the top pin inside the top arm of the uni joint, and make sure we're not blocking the bottom from coming through that hole. Next, add some lubricant and wind it down. Okay, now that one's pressed through enough and I can see it protruding out the bottom, we can back our press off. Take it out of the way, flip this joint over, and now we can see that top cap of the uni joint has now protruded through the side there. This is where we take our multi-grips, give the cap a little twist with your multi-grips, and remove it from the top. Wow, that is absolutely ruined. That should be nice and greasy in there, and this should actually continue around as a full cap. There's a massive chunk out of the side. Oh, that is in bad condition. Very bad condition. Okay, now that that first cap's removed, we can pop our press onto the exposed end and push the bottom through. Once that's been pressed back through the other way, we can remove the press. Oh, the cap fell off the bottom, so that's one less job that we have to do. There we go, that cap's in a lot better condition than the first one, but yeah, it's got it's got a tiny bit of grease, but next to nothing really. So that was also in desperate need of repair. So now we'll be able to lift it up, poke the bottom out, and the top flange will come apart from the drive shaft. So next we've got to remove these last two legs from the flange, and we'll do that using the same method as the first two.
Nice.
Okay, the first uni joint is removed and looking incredibly worn. This was the very back one, so the one that was causing the problems. It is looking absolutely destroyed. A bit of the cap is still stuck on this prong of the uni joint, so absolutely terrible. Anyway, time for the brand new one to go in, and before we do that, we just need to clean out the channels those circlips sit in and make sure that there's no rough edges around the holes that the uni joints sit in. If there are any rough edges, carefully file them away and make sure that all the holes are nice and clean. Okay, we've cleaned up those surfaces. They're looking much better now and ready to accept the new uni joint. Also cleaned up a few of the burrs around the edge from the old uni joints. So looking much better now. So with our brand new uni joints, the first thing we have to do is install the little included grease fitting. So that just screws into the hole on the back of the uni joint there. Next, I'm going to remove any two opposing caps, being very careful not to disrupt the bearings inside. There's one. And two. Next, we can gently insert this into the flange, putting one arm in and then the second. Reinstall the caps and press them into place until the channel is visible, so we can pop the locking clips in place. You might notice your new uni joint is a little bit tight in the flange. So a tip I picked up watching a YouTube video by Chris Fix, which is a fantastic channel, definitely check it out if you haven't already, is to take a hammer and give the flange a bit of a tap on both sides, just to help settle the uni joint properly. There we go, nice and loose now. So the next step is going to be to align the new uni joint with the drive shaft, and this is where those marks we made earlier are going to come into play. Now this joint was a little bit harder to remove than we were expecting. We had to add a lot of lubricant to get it loose, and in doing so, we've unfortunately wiped off all our markings that we made earlier. So we're just going to have to guess, but if your markings are still there, line them up before installing the new uni joint. Okay, that new uni joint is fully installed and moving around nice and freely, which is fantastic. Definitely a massive step up from the old joint. Next step is going to be to add some grease to this new joint, and as I mentioned earlier, I'll be using this Newlon grease that's been designed to be used on uni joints. Keep pumping the grease until it comes out of the boots. Don't forget to give it a clean up, and we're good to go. Okay, that's the first joint all done. I'll quickly do these other two using the exact same method and we'll pop everything back together. Okay, 3 brand new uni joints fully installed and she's ready to go back in the car. Now we have already taken a wire brush and cleaned up these flanges, but I'm also going to just clean up where they bolt into underneath the car. Okay, we've got the drive shaft sitting back in place on these jack stands. This would normally be the part where you'd line up those marks we made earlier, but during the removal of the old uni joints, we did wear off most of those marks. So we put everything back where we think it should go, but it shouldn't really matter each way. It's just, in my mind, that if you can put it back on the exact way it came off, that's always the best case scenario. But it shouldn't matter too much. So the next thing I'm going to do is take this removable Loctite or thread locker, give the bolts a once over, and then get these 2 ends fully installed. Now, one thing I did forget to mention is you will also need a torque wrench as well, and that's to torque these bolts up to the factory spec. So I've consulted my workshop manual for the Ranger, and I need to torque these to around 110 Newton meters. So I've set my torque wrench to that, and let's torque them up. So it's a brand new day. Last night while reinstalling that drive shaft, we really learnt the true value of a torque wrench. I checked the torque ratings for both the front and the rear mounting points of the drive shaft, did those all to spec and that worked a treat. But while reinstalling the center bearing, probably just because we'd been filming all day and a bit tired, thought let's not worry about checking the torque specs for those. Cranked it way too tight and this was the result. So sheared that bolt off completely, 30 seconds, that's all it would have taken for me to walk inside to the computer, all of 10 meters away that has the full workshop manual saved, and that would have prevented this. I know it looks like Bianca did most of the work removing that bolt, and for the most part that's true, but I promise I was helping out as well. Anyway, it was dark by the time we finished the install, so I've saved the first test drive for today. And let's go find out how she drives. Yes, and just like that, my squeaky noise has gone completely. There's way less vibration coming through the steering wheel. And my drive shaft is no longer about to fall out the bottom of the car, so that's also great news. I hope that video has given you guys the confidence you need to get out there and change your own uni joints, or at very least inspect the condition of them to see if they do need replacing. If you use the right tools, take your time, it's a pretty straightforward job. If you'd like to see what the basic service procedure looks like with these particular engines, including the fuel filter, check out this video up here, or if that's enough mechanical content for you, then check out this video instead. Thank you so much for watching, and a huge thanks to those of you who have been subscribing to the channel and liking all these videos. It really goes a long way towards helping the channel to grow. I'll catch you guys in the next one.